It was a Wednesday when the world shifted under me. Not violently, more like a slow slide of ground that only gives way once you're already off balance. The base was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet you only get after a long stretch of deployments. We were supposed to be in debrief, but my phone lit up with a delivery alert. Package signed and delivered. Strange, I hadn't ordered anything. After chow, I walked back to my quarters and found the box outside my door. Brown, taped tight. My name scrawled across the front in my wife's handwriting. No return address. I opened it with the Leatherman I kept clipped to my belt. Inside, neatly stacked in bubble wrap, were the empty boxes of my medals. Bronze Star, Navy Commendation, Good Conduct, even my boot camp graduation pin. But the medals themselves, gone. Just the velvet-lined shells staring back at me like open mouths with no breath. At the bottom of the box was a single sheet of paper. No salutation. No closure. I sold them. I need something real in my life now. I'm sorry. I filed for divorce. You'll find the paperwork with my lawyer. I'm flying to Santorini with the girls next week. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mara. I read it twice. Then again. My hand didn't shake. My pulse didn't race. I sat down on the edge of the cot and just stared at the medals boxes like I was studying them for a test. My name is Staff Sergeant David Rourke. I'm 36 years old. I've served 3 tours. Once in Helmand, twice in Syria. I've been shot at, patched up, stitched up, and sent back out more times than I care to count. But that letter? That was the first time I didn't know how to move. I think I just shut down. There's this switch inside you the military installs early on. Compartmentalization. You flip it when things get too loud, too raw. So I flipped mine. Let the numbness in. I folded the letter neatly, put it back in the box, and closed the lid. No yelling, no smashing things, no calls. I didn't even text her back. I just sat there, with the sun cutting through the slats of the blinds and landing right across that empty Bronze Star case. It glinted, a mockery of what used to be there. Outwardly, I was calm. Quiet, like I always am. The kind of calm people mistake for strength, but really it's just a dam holding back the flood. And inside? Inside was a ruin. A different kind of war had started. And I wasn't ready for this one. There's a moment in the field, right after you spot movement on the horizon, but before the first shot rings out, when the whole world feels suspended. That hush before the storm. It's when you tighten your grip, lower your breath, and lock in. That's where I lived for the next few weeks. In that space between suspicion and action. On the surface, I played it by the book. Morning drills, briefings, reports, the same humorless coffee in the same cracked mug. My guys didn't ask questions. I've never been the open type anyway. They probably assumed I was tired from deployment, or maybe working through some battlefield ghosts like all of us do. But every night, after lights out, I started building my own war map. I had one of those small government-issued notebooks we all carry. Black cover, squared paper. It was supposed to be for recon sketches or patrol logs, but mine became something else entirely. Each page was another piece of her, of them, laid out like a puzzle. Names, dates, transactions. I started with what I knew. Mara had sold the medals. That wasn't just betrayal. It was a choice. A deliberate erasure of everything I had bled for. And not just mine. Those medals, they were for the guys I couldn't bring back. For O'Hara, who never made it out of Mosul. For Santiago, who bled out on a mountainside while I held pressure to his neck and whispered lies that he'd be okay. She'd sold them. For what? Cocktails in a white bikini and sunset selfies with women who clapped when I left the room. So I went hunting. First, her financials. She'd always been careless with money, but I'd never questioned it. I let her handle the house while I was deployed. I figured that was fair. What a mistake. I called in a favor from a friend in cyber intel. Nothing official, just a quiet background sweep. He owed me for a roadside save in Aleppo. He sent me a spreadsheet the next day. Bank accounts I didn't know existed. Withdrawals days before I got that box. A pawn shop in Austin. Iron and Silk, of all names, where my metals were appraised, sold for far less than they meant. There was even a Venmo log with laughing emojis in the description. Freedom funds. I felt sick, like my body couldn't hold itself up anymore. I remember sitting on the barracks floor back against the locker, trying not to throw up. But I didn't stop. I created burner accounts, shadow emails. I messaged the pawn shop, pretending to be a collector interested in military awards. I asked for photos, lot numbers. One of the medals had my name engraved on the back. The guy sent me a picture of it. There it was. Rourke, D. He was asking $95. I stared at the image for a long time. The ribbon was slightly frayed. It looked tired, like me. I didn't even respond. I just saved the photo. A week later, I requested leave. Said it was for mental health decompression after deployment. No one questioned it. PTSD is the new armor. We all hide behind it when we need to. I flew home without telling anyone. No Mara, no family, just me and a duffel. I didn't even go to the house. I rented a room above an old mechanic's shop where the Wi-Fi barely worked and the mattress felt like sleeping on sandbags. I started watching her. Not in the movie kind of way. No trench coat and sunglasses. Just casual, silent observation. I needed to know what I was walking into. What kind of woman sends you a divorce agreement wrapped in betrayal and then disappears to drink Prosecco on the Mediterranean? Turns out Mara hadn't just gone to Santorini. She went there twice. The second time, she didn't come back alone. His name was Tyler. I found him through a tagged Instagram story, his hand on her thigh at a beachside bar. He was younger, maybe 30, designer stubbled and gym-built, a business consultant, whatever the hell that means. They looked happy, smiling in that careless way people do when they're not thinking about the wreckage they left behind. I began digging into him, too. Tyler had no military background, no shared friends. Just a digital trail littered with exotic locations, crypto buzzwords, and motivational quotes about choosing joy. I began to suspect this went deeper than just betrayal. Something about the timing didn't sit right. The sale of the medals, the money movement, her rush to finalize the divorce while I was thousands of miles away. It all felt engineered. So I kept preparing. I went to the bank and quietly froze our joint accounts. I visited a lawyer I trusted from before I enlisted, one of the few people who still treated me like I had value beyond a uniform. She took one look at Mara's rushed petition and said, "She's hiding something." We opened an investigation. Financial discrepancies, property evaluations. There were forged signatures on documents I had never seen. My power of attorney, faked. My authorization for the house refinance, forged. Mara had been playing the long game while I was dodging IEDs. And suddenly, I wasn't just the betrayed husband anymore. I was the target of a scheme, a slow bleed, a dismantling of my life while I was overseas trusting the wrong person to guard the home front. I didn't say a word to her. Not yet. Because once you've seen war, you learn patience. And revenge, when it's earned, should never be rushed. The thing about betrayal, it doesn't stop when the truth hits you. It keeps unwinding, day after day, until you realize just how many cracks were already there before it all broke apart. I spent those days back home like a ghost, moving between the real world and the one in my head, cataloging memories I used to trust, conversations, glances. The way Mara would grip her wine glass a little tighter when I said I was being redeployed. The way she flinched when I mentioned our savings. The coldness in her voice that I'd chalked up to stress or bad sleep. Turns out the truth had been leaking out of her for a while. I just didn't want to see it. It started small. The dishwasher suddenly breaking just before I left for my last deployment. Her telling me not to worry about repairs. She'd handle it. Then the second car mysteriously needing a new transmission. Twice. Big, unnecessary expenses that drained the joint account I wasn't checking from overseas. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. Or maybe my last. And then there were the coincidences. Tyler. I found out he'd been following Mara on social media for a year before they ever posted together. Digging deeper, I saw comments on old photos, ones I'd never noticed because I didn't pay attention to Instagram back then. Harmless at first. Fire emojis, generic compliments. But then he started popping up in places that didn't make sense. A conference in Miami the same weekend, Mara said she was visiting her cousin. A mutual friend tagged in a brunch photo where he's sitting 3 seats away from her. They were orbiting each other long before the explosion. She hadn't just stumbled into someone new after our marriage started crumbling. She'd been digging the tunnel out while I was still guarding the door. I remember staring at a photo of them on that damn Santorini balcony. Her wearing the sundress I bought her for our anniversary. Laughing. Head tilted into his chest like it was the most natural place in the world to land. And I wondered, was I ever that for her? I didn't want to admit it, but the doubts had started earlier. Subtle shifts. How she stopped asking about my deployments. How she forgot my birthday last year. The way she avoided eye contact during video calls, like she was always half distracted, eyes flickering toward a second screen. At the time, I told myself it was just the strain of military life, that we were weathering the distance like all couples in uniform do. I believed in duty, in sacrifice, in the idea that love was forged stronger by hardship. But now I know love doesn't disappear in one grand betrayal. It fades, slowly. It slips out the back door while you're still making breakfast and thinking everything's fine. One night I sat in the rental apartment with the lights off, watching the street below. I had a glass of whiskey in one hand and my notebook in the other. Pages filled with dates, bank transactions, pawn receipts, Tyler's socials. I'd become my own intelligence officer. And yet, beneath the strategy, the building case, the quiet steps toward confrontation, there was something messier. I missed her. Not the woman she had become. Not the schemer in white sandals sipping Aperol with my medal's blood money. I missed the girl who used to climb into my lap when I came home and press her forehead to mine. The one who sent me a video on my second deployment of her dancing barefoot in the kitchen to Springsteen, holding a spatula like a microphone. Was she ever real? Or just part of the mask she wore until I was out of sight? The emotional tension was eating me alive. I'd never been the type to dwell. Combat teaches you to compartmentalize or die. But there was something about this kind of war. It followed you into the silence, into the cracked linoleum of a rented floor, into the stillness of a room that should have smelled like home, not betrayal. I found myself playing what-if games in my head. What if I'd called more? What if I hadn't volunteered for that last tour? What if I'd paid more attention? But I knew the truth. This wasn't about absence. This was about character. Heron and mine. Because somewhere deep down, I had known. And I'd looked away. We always do, don't we? We make excuses for the ones we love because it hurts less than facing what's in front of us. That week, a lawyer's envelope was slipped under the door. It was Mara's final offer. Divorce terms. She wanted full ownership of the house, claimed I was emotionally unavailable and had neglected the marriage due to career prioritization. I smiled at the irony. I'd gone to war for this country. I'd risked my life for strangers. And now, the woman I trusted most had weaponized my loyalty against me. But I didn't respond, not yet, because I'd found something else, something buried, a quitclaim deed, my name scrawled in shaky ink, supposedly signed by me from Syria. It wasn't mine. The notary didn't exist. The date was 3 days before an ambush that left me unconscious for 12 hours in a field hospital. Forgery. That was the moment the anticipation turned electric. When everything clicked into place and the slow unraveling became a fuse, burning fast toward the blast. I wasn't just betrayed. I was being erased. And it was time to stop watching. It was time to move. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that feels like a blank page. Gray sky, quiet streets, nothing urgent in the air. That's the thing about disaster. It doesn't always come with a siren. Sometimes it walks through the front door with the key you paid for, wearing your wife's perfume and carrying the paperwork to burn your life down. I'd been sitting in my rental apartment, boots off, drinking black coffee that tasted like rust. I hadn't slept. Every hour bled into the next. I was running on instinct like I had overseas, quiet, watchful, calculating, but the battlefield was different now. No rifles, no chain of command. Just me versus the woman I used to trust with everything. Then she called. Not a message, not a letter this time. She called. My phone buzzed with her name like a ghost showing up at your front door. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. David, I heard you're back in town. You should have told me. I think it's time we talk, face to face. We can make this easier, okay? It doesn't have to get ugly. That word, ugly, like she hadn't already dragged us through the dirt. I knew what this was. She was trying to get ahead of the blowback. She'd realized I was digging. Maybe her lawyer tipped her off. Maybe Tyler started panicking. Either way, they knew I wasn't going to just sign the divorce papers and walk off like some docile soldier. They'd underestimated me. Again. I showed up at the house the next morning. Our house. Still had my name on the deed, technically, but there were layers to that now. Legal minefields she thought she'd laid just right. The lawn was overgrown. Porch light flickering. The place looked like what we had become. A structure without a soul. She opened the door in a silk robe like it was just another morning. No shame, no apology. Just tired eyes and forced calm. David, she said softly. This isn't the way. I stepped inside without asking. The place reeked of lavender candles and lies. You forged my name, I said. She blinked. Just once. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out the photocopy from my jacket and laid it on the dining table. The fake quitclaim deed. The false notary. Her signature, real and neat. Mine, jagged and obviously faked. I was in a Syrian field hospital when this was signed, I said. Unconscious, hooked up to an IV and stitched across the ribs. You want to explain how I managed to walk into a Texas notary office while I was bleeding out in a desert? Silence. Her hand twitched. A tiny tell. I saw it before she could stop it. You think the court's not going to notice? I added, leaning in. You think this ends with you tanning in Greece and me sleeping in barracks without a penny to my name? Still nothing. But her eyes darted to her phone on the counter. Don't, I warned. You make one call, I walk straight into the DA's office. And just like that, her mask slipped. God, David, she hissed, stepping back. Why do you always have to be the goddamn hero? I laughed. Just once. Sharp. Bitter. If I was a hero, I wouldn't have married you. That cracked something. Her face twisted. Pride. Rage. Maybe even a flicker of guilt, though I doubted that. She folded her arms and leaned against the counter like we were just two people having a bad argument. You were never here, she said. You were always deployed, always chasing some medal, some mission. I got tired of waiting, of feeling like a placeholder in your life. I looked around at the walls I helped paint, the floor I installed before my second deployment. I looked at the chipped photo frames she hadn't bothered to take down. One of them still had us smiling in a blurry shot at Lake Travis, arms around each other, sunburned and happy. You sold those medals, I said. You sold the dead men I served with. You erased what little piece I had left. Her voice dropped. I did what I had to do. And there it was. Not regret, not remorse, just calculation. This wasn't a woman who made a mistake. This was a woman who made a plan. She forged my signature, liquidated our joint savings, sold my awards, filed for divorce while I was out of the country, knowing damn well I couldn't contest it fast enough from a combat zone. All while warming up to a man with perfect teeth and no spine. The storm broke that afternoon. I didn't lay a hand on her. I would never. But words? I let them loose. Everything I had buried under the calm surface exploded. My voice cracked. My chest felt like it was tearing open. I yelled so hard I thought the walls would collapse. She yelled back, screaming about loneliness, about abandonment, about how I chose the military over us. I reminded her I didn't sign up to fight wars so she could screw someone who sells crypto over brunch, that I bled in foreign dirt while she forged my name in American ink. Then she threw the final punch. "He makes me feel alive, David. You haven't touched me in over a year." The silence after that was worse than the shouting. Something inside me, whatever had still been clinging to the memory of her, finally let go. I didn't slam the door when I left. I walked out quietly, because I realized something. This wasn't a marriage that broke. This was a setup, and I had walked right into it, but not anymore. Now it was my turn to draw the lines. After the blowout at the house, something in me went cold. Not numb, focused. I'd seen it before, that transition. It's the shift that happens after the first mortar hits too close, and your brain decides survival means precision. No more room for panic, no more time for grief, just math and instincts. A mental switch, thrown without ceremony. She thought the worst was over. But the thing about war is, the enemy always underestimates the quiet ones. I moved into a cheap studio a few blocks from the courthouse. Windows facing nothing, mattress on the floor. I didn't need comfort, just proximity. Every morning, I'd hit the gym at 0500, grab a coffee at the same rundown diner, then walk across the street to the county records office. My lawyer, Linda, met me twice a week. She was sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, gray-streaked hair in a tight knot, voice like gravel and steel. "This was never just about a divorce," she said one morning, slapping another set of financials on the table between us. "It's fraud, and I'm betting money laundering, too." "What makes you think that?" She leaned in, flipping a bank statement. "Because Mara's not smart enough to pull this off alone, but someone else is." Tyler. His name came up again and again. Accounts opened in Delaware under an LLC called Nova Echo Holdings. Transfers between his crypto wallets and an overseas account in the Caymans. The same account Mara wired $30,000 to just 4 weeks before filing the divorce. They were using my deployment as cover. Every absence, every blackout from the field, it was a window for them to move assets, forge documents, clean their tracks, and the worst part, they nearly got away with it. I started compiling evidence the same way I used to prep for raids, methodical, silent, relentless. I printed statements, emails, notary records, phone logs, pieced together timelines. I tracked down the notary whose name appeared on the forged quitclaim deed, a retired woman living in Amarillo. She hadn't notarized anything in over a year, and definitely not for someone claiming to be me. She gave me a written statement, signed, dated. Then I traced the digital trail. My buddy Mason, still active with Intel, helped me quietly. No red flags. Just a favor for an old friend who once dragged him out of a blown-out stairwell in Aleppo. He pulled metadata from emails Mara had sent me while I was overseas. Several of them had been routed through a masked IP address. Not from Texas. From Miami. And the timestamps matched the same weekend Tyler had posted photos from a beach condo, with Mara in the background. I felt my jaw tighten as I flipped through them, like puzzle pieces that suddenly made sense once you saw the image forming. But what cracked the whole thing wide open was a voice recording. See, what Mara didn't know, what most civilians don't, is that I had installed a discreet military-grade recording device in my home office before my second deployment. Paranoia? Maybe. Habit? Definitely. I'd used it mostly to catch up on things I missed, conversations about bills, delivery guys, repairs. But I'd forgotten to remove it. And it was still backing up audio to the cloud. Linda found it when I mentioned I used to record things. We pulled the archives. And there it was. Clear as day. "You sure he won't come back early? I don't want to deal with a pissed-off Marine with access to weapons." Relax. He's halfway across the world. Even if he finds out, we'll be divorced by then. And the house? I've got the papers. Use that old notary's information. He won't know it's fake. He never looks at this stuff. And the medals? Sold 'em. Figured I'd get something out of this mess. He cared more about those things than he ever did about me. You're a savage. I'm just done waiting. I sat there for 10 minutes after it ended, just breathing, listening to the hum of the fridge and the ticking of a cheap wall clock. Done waiting, huh? Good. So was I. That same day, Linda filed a petition to freeze all property and assets. The forged quit claim entered into evidence. The audio file delivered to her contact in the DA's office. But I wasn't finished yet. I needed them to feel it, not just legally, personally. So I started making noise. I leaked the audio to one of Mara's coworkers anonymously, just a simple email titled, "Thought you should know who you're working with." I sent copies of the bank statements to her father, retired Navy. He used to shake my hand with pride when I came back in uniform. Now he'd see what his daughter really thought of men like me. And Tyler? He got a phone call from a friend in Homeland Security. Nothing illegal, just inquiry. A little heat on his crypto businesses. Enough to freeze movement. Enough to make investors nervous. Enough to cause cracks. I sat in my apartment, listening to the slow crumble I'd triggered, and for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe. This wasn't over. But the tide had turned. They thought they'd planned the perfect ambush. Thought I was just another quiet soldier, too loyal, too absent, too blind. But I came back, and now it was my turn to go on the offensive. Revenge isn't a scream in the dark, it's a whisper in a quiet room where everyone finally hears what you've been holding back. I waited until the courthouse hearing. Mara walked in with Tyler behind her, all smug smiles and 2 white teeth. She wore a cream blazer like she was showing up to negotiate a real estate deal, not defend her fraud. I didn't look at her. I just sat at the table, straight-backed, calm. That old soldier still inside me, quiet and deadly when it counted. The judge was mid-sentence when Linda slid the flash drive across the table. "Your Honor," she said, "this contains audio of the defendant discussing forged documents, the illegal sale of military honors, and financial misconduct, all during the time my client was on active deployment overseas." Mara's face drained. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The judge paused, inserted the flash drive, pressed play. The courtroom was silent except for her voice, bragging about how she'd sold my medals, how she'd faked my signature, how I cared more about those things than her. Tyler stood up halfway through it, walked out, cowered. She sat there, eyes wide, no makeup thick enough to cover the collapse. The judge looked at her like she was a disease. By the end of the day, the divorce was halted, fraud investigation pending, house frozen, her account seized for review. She'd lost everything in one afternoon. And I stood in the parking lot afterward, watching the wind whip through the trees. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just breathed, because justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just the sound of your boots walking away. Free. It didn't take long. The DA filed charges within the week: fraud, forgery, and intentional misrepresentation. Mara was served at her office, handcuffed, quietly. No drama, no screaming. Just her in a pantsuit, walking out under fluorescent lights as coworkers pretended not to look. Tyler vanished. Word was he fled to Costa Rica. Left her to take the fall. The DA's office issued a bench warrant, but it was clear he'd planned his escape. Let the coward run. His name was already ash in her mouth. She took a deal, confession in exchange for reduced sentencing. The house came back to me. So did the rest. I stood in that living room again, alone. Same chipped floors, same old photos. Everything looked smaller now. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But beneath the weight was something else. Peace. The kind you earn. The kind you bleed for.